this is a special meeting of the board, it has to be directly related to the agenda. And so the agenda tonight is the school budget. So if you could keep it to that topic so we don't have any violations of open meetings laws or anything like that. The other thing is we cannot respond to you either way, whether we agree with you or we don't agree with you. That's just, we can't do that according to open meetings laws. So it's not like we are being mean up here. We just cannot respond to you at all. So for that, for the first one, if I could have Mario Chapa come up, please.
Hello. Let me start by saying what a great country this is, what a great state this is, and what a wonderful county we live in. So let's use this opportunity while we search for a new superintendent to address some issues that are hindering our great school district. We've been Montgomery ISD residents for over 10 years, and we've always been amazed on how great our teachers and schools are. However, there are trends that really worry us. A few years back, we had bus routes adjusted in order to save some money. I thought it was a good move, and the kids can walk a few more blocks. What's the harm, right? But then, budget issues started hitting the very core of what a school should do, the classes. Good teachers are leaving our school, and classes are no longer offered, particularly language classes. Classes such as French, where one of our high school kids was left without an opportunity to further advance and finish her French studies. Last year, we were here to defend the dual language, mainly due to budget issues. And I know that 6 out of 12 of the dual language teachers left for Conroe for lack of opportunities here. And when the high schools separated, we went from having one great band program to 2 mediocre bands with a great building. Now, in the 10 years we've lived here, both population and taxes have gone up. So we shouldn't be having budget issues. And the classes cost the same no matter the subjects, especially if our teachers are leaving because of low wages or lack of opportunities. We have more than a budget issue. So let's use this opportunity to not only fix our budget, but make sure we allocate the money in the budget in the right way. I used to have a friend that worked in a manufacturing company, and the owner was so worried about the power bill that he would shut down the production line. This is exactly what we're doing here. We're shutting down classes to fix our budget. It's like the NFL reducing their games because their games are so expensive. That's what they do, they play games. Production facilities should be open and producing, and schools should be open in classes and teaching. So please take this opportunity wisely and fix your budget. I work professionally for a utility district, and I run a budget similar to this school. So I know the pains, but I also know how much money it is, a $100 million budget or $200 million budget. I know how much money it is, so there's a lot of things can be done, and you guys need to make sure whoever takes the reins of this school district allocates the proper budget to do what a school district is supposed to do, which is teach the kids. Language is the single most important thing that differentiates us from any other living forms. Language is what helped us catch the Unabomber. Language such as the Navajo language was precisely why we in World War II were able to have a code that nobody else could break. Language is more important than I think the school district thinks. In America, which is a melting pot for the whole world, we should be embracing different languages, because the moment we don't embrace different languages, we're doomed as a country to only do business with countries that are willing to speak our language. It is well known that people that speak different languages think in different ways, because languages are made from the reality of the people who invented the language. So the more languages you know, the broader your mind is. So please look for other places where to cut your budget or balance your budget, not cutting our kids the opportunity to have great classes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can Rachel Blaylock come up, please?
Good evening. My name is Rachel Blaylock, and my daughter has just finished her 4th year of a 6-year commitment to the dual language program at Stewart Creek Elementary. My son will start kindergarten this year, and I really want him to have this same opportunity to learn a second language. In September and October of last year, the parent and community supporters of our dual language program spoke to you about the educational and the cultural benefits that this program brings to the children in our district. We put together a packet of information then, and all of you have this, and we have a copy here tonight to share with our new superintendent. In October, the school board decided to continue the program as is at Stewart Creek and Lincoln Elementary Schools. In the district, you all showed great support for our program in the months to follow that. Tonight, as you consider the budget for the following years, I would ask that you consider all of those benefits that we discussed then. I'm not going to go through them now because that's not, I know what this meeting is about, and your decision just a few months ago to fully support that dual language program when you look at the budget now. If budget cuts must be made, please look at smarter and leaner spending for all the areas in our district, and do not look at cutting out educational programs such as dual language, GT, things like that. As always, reach out to any of us in this dual language supporters group if we can be of any help, and that's all I ask for tonight. Thank you.
And I'm sorry if I misstate the last name here. Colby Propes?
This is weird sitting, but good evening. My name is Colby Propes, and I am here tonight also on behalf of the dual language program. First off, I think we can all agree that financial security of our district is of utmost importance, and that the spending habits of MISD must be carefully examined in order to ensure the future of our district. As you begin discussions in your budget workshop, I urge you to keep in mind the purpose of a school district. A school district exists to provide educational services to students and to develop an environment where they can thrive. With that in mind, I suggest that teachers, their salaries, and student programs should be the absolute last resort when addressing budget concerns. The dual language program has been targeted for cuts in the past, and as recently as last October, we were assured that the program would continue for the 2020-21 school year with the full support of the MISD administration. This program and our teachers are worth saving, and I urge you to look elsewhere for spending cuts. I would also like to request the details around the expected incremental savings from potentially cutting the program be provided to the public. From our perspective, there is minimal overhead expense associated with the program, and the students in these classes will have to be educated regardless of if the program exists or not. The premium paid to dual language teachers is minimal and should be covered by federal funding. In fact, some federal funding will be lost when English language learners in dual language are moved to a traditional ESL program, and the native English-speaking students are no longer allowed to participate. Lastly, I would like to reiterate our support for growing the program. With ongoing support from parents and active participation from the district, this program will continue to grow and produce amazing students who have unique cultural experiences. Thank you for your time and consideration.
And the last one that we have here tonight is Amy Jones.
Good evening. I'm Amy Jones. I am a mother of Carmen Gomez, who is a fourth grader in the dual language program at Stewart Creek Elementary. We moved here from Houston because of the educational excellence that Montgomery ISD put forth. We moved here specifically for the dual language program. If you cut programs like this, I believe that attract parents, I believe that people will start moving away from this district. We, as a family, have chosen to move after my child is done with fifth grade. She has made wonderful friends here, and she loves it here. However, because the school district has chosen not to continue it through junior high and high school, our priority as parents is to make sure she can get the best possible education globally, as well as just in general. So I do hope that you choose to keep it, because it does attract people to Montgomery. And I hope that, because I believe people will leave, other people will leave if you start cutting educational programs versus other programs that you could not, I don't believe you should cut any educational programs. I know there's going to be, you're going to have to make it lean, I understand that, but I do believe that educational programs are not the way to go. Thank you.
Gesagva Sato. It's two last names I got from my African husband, 2 for 1 special. I'm here to represent the Hispanic population of Montgomery ISD. We have students, at least where my children attend, Stewart Creek Elementary. A large part of our lower income families come from Lake Conroe Village, which is a neighborhood that is districted to our elementary school. Many of the students who live there participate in that dual language program, and that program is brought about for that population. That's the principal purpose of that program, is to take care of those minority populations, immigrant families, kids coming into an elementary setting that have never had schooling. And so our kindergarten dual language teachers are working overtime to not only teach them English, but also Spanish in their own native language, speak it correctly, reading and writing. So my 3 children were a part of that program. 2 of them still are. 1 is already at Oak Hills Junior High. But moving back to Texas 3 years ago, we experienced a lot of discrimination, racial slurs used against my children in 4th grade. 4th grade on the playground, he was being called bad names, bad words, by children of a different race, and it was heartbreaking. But by December time, many of those kids who had used those racial slurs and names were friends with my son, because they were in the same classroom and they were learning from each other, and it was a beautiful thing to see. So I'd like to just reemphasize that when these budget cuts are made, to at least protect that very small minority that we have in this community, but it is also growing. I know CISD is working to expand their dual language program. We're not that far down the road. Our community will continue to grow and become more diverse. And I would just ask that as you do these budget cuts, that you would maintain those protections for the least of these who are coming in financial strains and other things. We've seen how in this dual language program, Spanish-speaking families are more active in our schools. You can ask Ms. Salter at the cultural exchange party we had with parents and students eating and joining together. It was bringing a community together. So I just urge you in these budget meetings to remember that those numbers affect families and affect the community atmosphere that we have here, and that we want to continue to promote a diverse and equal environment for students to exchange cultural, lingual, and opportunities as before they leap into junior high and high school and things become more difficult and tense, I think. So thank you, that's it.
That's all the public comments that we have tonight. So at this time, what we're going to have on the agenda is our budget workshop. So Chris, who is the CFO of MISD, take it away.
I don't know if Dr. Dixon wanted to say something to get us started, or if you want me to jump right into it. But
I would like for you to jump right in. I've been busy since you guys hired me. There are a couple of things, and I think that I just need to announce to y'all that are going to be implemented that will have some positive effects on the current year budget. We would like to bring our staff back on the 8th, and they're ready to come back. We have our sanitation crews all up to date. This will only be what we call the 12-month employees, the 226, 221, and 240s, and we're going to kind of use that as a test run as we bring the next group of people won't come back until August 1. We also, and you have a packet in front of you tonight, our coaches are anxiously awaiting for the athletes to come back. And just as we're going to bring the staff back to test run getting our staff in, how to tweak that and get everything implemented, we're going to go ahead and open our strength training for our 2 high schools. That'll be all the athletes, the male and the female both. We have a plan. You have the plan in place. Included in that is also the aquatic center. We're just informing you at this time about that. We're still waiting final clarification for UIL. But those kids are ready to get trained and get in competition. Our kids have revamped their garages and their bedrooms and everything else to try to stay into shape, and we'll have 2 different programs. You'll see in the packet Montgomery and Lake Creek. One will be run by performance course, and one will be run by our coaches. And a little madness in that design is if we do see a sanitation or any kind of contagion problem, we'll be able to approach it, what worked and what did not work. So we'll look at that. And then Mark, like I said, they will start back up the swim program. That will have a little revenue there, and we'll be able to bring that. And bringing all of the staff back on the 8th will stop the double payments. That for now, all people will be back at work. They won't get paid double for coming in because they'll be at work. So that'll give a little relief for this last month of this program. The principals then on July 1 will let their staff know of access to their buildings. If you recall, we kind of booted everybody out very quickly, and they're chomping at the bits to get back to their rooms to set them up for next year. Each campus building will work with their custodial staff to let the teachers know about coming back in. And then any persons who we have a term in education called non-duty days, and everybody else calls those vacation or Saturdays and Sundays or whatever. We do have people who have non-duty days left, so effective the 8th, if they have any, they'll request the use of their non-duty days through their supervisor. So we're trying to get back to the near normal that we can. Thank you.
all right. Well, good evening. Once again, it's good to see y'all in person. I know that my time here in Montgomery ISD has been brief, but it has been a fast couple of months since I arrived back in April. Once again, I know I mentioned it last time, but due to my late arrival into the district, this budget creation calendar is kind of all screwed up this year. So for that, I apologize, but we're trying to make it through it as fast and as efficiently as we possibly can. So tonight, I wanted to provide an update on where we are in the budget process. And so tonight, we'll kind of go over, we'll start with a recap of our budget workshop number 1 that was held on May the 5th. And in case you can't see the screens, I passed out a copy of the presentation for you. Then we'll go over the 2020-2021 budget and talk about estimated revenues, proposed expenditures, and then a few items that are not included so far in that budget. We had a request from a board member to talk about some teacher salary data, so I wanted to show that to you tonight and kind of help emphasize to you why getting as close to a balanced budget as possible is important when you see your salary data. And then we'll talk a little bit about the budget adoption timeline and what our next steps are and where we go from here. So just a quick recap of our first budget workshop. We talked about changes that were brought about during the passage of House Bill 3 last summer. And so hopefully that educated you just a little bit or reminded you a little bit about some of the changes that took place. We talked about the status of the 2019-20 budget. At this time, as expressed during that meeting, we feel pretty positive. We have a good feeling about the 19-20 budget. Remember that budget was, when it was adopted, was over a $4 million deficit. Through some additional revenues and through some expenditure reductions, it appears that we're going to come in at the end of June, hopefully with a relatively flat budget, meaning that $4 million deficit, hopefully the majority of it has been erased, okay, which is good news. So that should lessen the impact on the fund balance for 19-20. Always positive news. During that meeting, we talked about a preliminary revenue estimate of $75,366,037. And at that time, we had preliminary expenditure estimates of $78,260,045. So you can see once again, at that stage, we were talking about a proposed budget deficit of about 2.8, almost $2.9 million, okay? And so as we transition into the 2020-2021 budget, I will be honest and tell you not much has changed since our last meeting, okay? We have been continuing to run updated revenue numbers. The only revenue change on the sheet, the new projected revenue number for 2021 is $75,496,000. The only change was previously on my previous revenue estimate, I had accidentally omitted the $130,000 for the direct federal revenue for the E-rate program. You can find that under the federal section in code 5949. So that's the only addition or change in revenue at this time. Just to review the revenue sources, we do get revenue from 3 sources for the school district, local, state, and federal. And this is only revenue that's tied to the general fund. So 199 Maintenance and Operation Fund is what we refer to it as. The district does receive other federal entitlements that are received in other funds. So that does not take those revenues into account. So for the local revenue, we're proposing a total of $63.9 million, which is an increase of 7.6% over what was adopted for 2019-2020. The left column there has the 2019-20 adopted, and then in the middle column, you can see what the district has collected as of April 30th, and then that right column obviously is the 2021 proposed. You'll notice a decrease in state revenue proposed for 2020-2021, a reduction of about 22.6%. remember that we no longer qualify for the fast growth allotment, okay? In order to qualify for that, you had to be in the 75th percentile or above on your growth over the last 3 years. When the numbers were run, we were at 72.3%, I believe. So we just missed it by a couple of percentage points, but that was over $2 million worth of revenue that the district will not receive for 2021. In addition, the district does not qualify any longer for the new instructional facilities allotment money that we were receiving for the new construction of Lake Creek and Oak Hills, because you only get that money for 2 years. And so for the 2021 budget year, that is no longer available to us, and that was a little over $400,000 worth of state revenue that was lost for that, okay? And then federal revenue is an increase primarily because of an increase in the money we receive from SHARs, but then also a recoding on my part. Currently, for 1920, the district accounted for the E-rate money out of a local source, and I'm moving it to a correct coding place of federal because it is coming from a federal source. So that's why I wanted that increase so much. This next slide is just the same exact information, just in a format that you're used to seeing on a monthly basis. This is how your monthly revenue reports are presented to you in your board packet. And so I just wanted to provide it to you in a format that was a little more familiar to you. That first format is the format that I'm used to preparing it for. And so I wanted to give it to you both ways in case that way you were a little more comfortable one way or the other. So last meeting, when we reviewed the campus allocations and department allocations, you remember I had a big draft thing over it because I had not had the opportunity to meet with all the campus principals at that time or the directors at all. And so I have met with every principal with the exception of Mr. Eaton because of obviously of his situation. And I have met with all department directors. And we have sat down, we've reviewed and had budget conversations about each one of their budgets for their campus and their departments. The budget process is a lot different than what they've been used to in prior years. I hope, and the feedback that I have received from them, it was very positive, that now they understand a little bit more about the budget that they have available to them. And my main goal in meeting with each person was to show them and to tell them that this isn't the finance guy putting numbers on a piece of paper and they have to go figure out how to make it work. I give them an allocation and then they tell me where they need to put the money in their budget to meet the needs of their campus or department. Okay, and so it puts a little bit of the emphasis back on them because they know what their campus needs are. I don't know what their campus needs are, and every campus has different needs. Okay, and so this sheet kind of outlines all of the different buckets of money that they get for their particular campus. And so each campus is listed with a projected enrollment. Most of those numbers were pulled from the fall PEEM snapshot. The only number that I modified a little bit was Lake Creek due to the addition of about 160 kids due to the ninth grade class coming in being a little larger. And so you have their salary amount, and then the next column is the other expenditures. And so I get that other expenditure amount by taking their projected enrollment times a specific dollar amount depending on what grade level that they serve. And so for the high schools, they get the same dollar amount per kid. The junior highs get the same dollar amount per kid, and then the elementary schools get the same dollar amount. And that way we try and help create equity and fairness. And the only difference in the amount of money that they get is based on the actual number of students on the campus, okay? And so when you add your salaries and your other expenses, that gives you your base allocation. And then all the columns to the right are the special populations or the additional revenue that's generated by the students on that campus. And so you have CTE allocation, special services, state comp ed, you have the bilingual, DAEP, early ed, dyslexia, and CCMR. And so some of those, the early ed, the dyslexia, and the CCMR are new allocations that were created as a part of House Bill 3. And so when you total all of those up, the total campus allocations for 2021 is $52.3 million, okay? And so then, as we go to the department allocation, oh, yes, sir. Sure. So the district earns additional dollars for those students who are identified as being in the special education program, okay? And so based on the PEIMS data that's submitted, we get a certain funding weight depending on what type of service that they need, okay? And so that money is used to pay for the special education teachers that are on their campus, and then also any supplies or services that those kids may need on that particular campus, okay? Now, it's not just our special service program here in Montgomery ISD, but unfortunately, the amount that the state sends for special education does not nearly cover all of the cost incurred by special service children. So the district does have to make up a portion of those services. Okay. Any other questions on the campus allocations? Okay.
Chris,
yes, sir.
Dyslexia is blank. Is that just we don't know yet what the number is? Or?
It's going to show up on the next page. Okay. Oh, so on the proposed department allocations, you will see each department listed. I have chosen to create some new organizational codes so that we can track departments specifically. In the past, most district departments were kind of lumped in together, and it was hard to delineate necessarily what budget was associated with which department. And so it's been my practice in the past. I want to make sure that each department director has their own money that they're responsible for. It makes it easier for me to track, holds some accountability to them. And so you will see some new organizational codes, such as if you look at 740, that's an operations code that did not exist in the 1920 budget, but we'll utilize that moving forward. 742 is human resources, 750 financial services, and then you can just continue on down the list at all of the other departments. Their allocations work the same basic way. I take the 1920 salaries and plug that into the salary column. The other expenses, since they don't have an enrollment to justify their expenses, I use the 1920 budget as their starting point, and then during our meetings we had conversations about whether that amount of money was adequate or whether they had additional needs that they were expecting for 2021, and so some of those were adjusted just a little bit. But you add the salaries and the other expenses to get the base allocation. Since most of the departments don't have ties to any of those other special populations, that's why most of those are blacked out. But you will notice that there is $200,000 set aside at the district level for the CTE program, $300,000 set aside for state comp ed, and then that's where your dyslexia money is at $735,000 for dyslexia, okay? And so the total department allocations total $26 million. Giving us a total expenditure allocation of $78.3 million. The highlighted number there on the screen is the projected revenue number of $75,496,000, and that results in a deficit budget of $2.88 million. Okay, so basically There have been a lot of changes within these parameters between departments and campuses because we've had staff members transfer from one campus to another, so we've worked through all of those issues, but the bottom line has stayed basically the same as it was back on May the 5th, okay? And so any questions about that? Yes, sir.
So the 75 million number in total revenue, and I think I asked you this before, and I just can't recall. So I think as of last count 2 weeks ago, Montgomery County had over 40,000 protests. So there's going to be a lot of people trying to get their tax values down.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How much of a haircut is this 75 million from what the data actually came from the county?
Okay.
Should we expect that number to be higher in a good situation?
So when we talk about revenue estimates, I am always hopeful that we collect more money than what I estimated, okay? I mean, I try and give you a realistic number of where I think we're going to be, but things change on a daily basis. And so it's only as accurate as the information that I have on hand that day, okay? Typically, I'm very conservative on how I budget revenues, and I'm extremely conservative as we sit here today, not knowing what next year looks like with COVID-19 and attendance and enrollment. So as far as tax values go, we got a preliminary estimate from the County Appraisal District. That number came in at a little over $7.1 billion, okay? I took 2% off the top of that for protest and loss of value, okay? And so that brought it down to just a little over $7 billion. And then I did my calculations off of that. I estimated a 97.5% collection rate, and it gave me a number. And then I even lowered that just a little bit to be a little more conservative in case there was something that we missed. Maybe protests were higher than normal or something else. And so that $61.7 million worth of local property tax revenue is a number that I feel comfortable with as I sit here today. Am I going to be upset if it comes in at 62 million or absolutely not, okay? But it's just my best estimate that I can give you.
So you would sum this up right now as you under-promising and
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, and unfortunately, from my chair, that's what I always try and do because I want to try and prepare you for the worst case scenario, and then hopefully it turns out better, okay? The last thing that I want to do is overpromise and underdeliver, but I also want to make sure I get as close of an estimate as I possibly can because I don't want to cut it too short and be too conservative because this is what you're using to make your decisions based on, okay? Yes, sir. Any other questions? And so next what I want to do is kind of look at some of these expenditures in a little more detail and kind of give you a comparison of how they look compared to 1920 budget. And so us school finance people, we have a different language. We have a different vernacular that we talk in. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to talk about expenditures based on a function level. And this is how you will adopt the actual budget. You will adopt it on a functional level. And so whenever we present that at the public hearing for you to adopt, this is the format in which you will see it, okay? And so it's broken down between function 11, which is instruction. So think of that as just general classroom activities. 12 is your media services, fancy word for library. 13 is your curriculum. 21 is instructional leadership. So think of that maybe as your administrative level, Wendy, Dwayne, those kind of positions. 23 is going to be your school leadership, so obviously that's going to be your campus principals, APs. 31 is counseling, 33 is health, transportation, 36 is athletics, general admin, maintenance and operations, security, so forth and so on down the line. And so I think it's always important to just kind of see how the budget looks one year compared to the next. And so you'll see there are some changes here and there. You see a dramatic change in function 13. You see a decrease from 292,000 down to 17,000. That's nothing to be concerned about. That's more of a style change with me coming in and how I like to code expenditures as compared to the previous person. Those expenditures that were in 13 got moved to 21. Okay, and so that's why I say that's nothing to be concerned about. You can see that obviously since I did that, you see the expenditures in 21 went up. Okay, school leadership stayed about the same. Just a little bit of decrease in counseling. The only thing that I can think of is because I don't remember anything specifically drastically changing in counseling, other than maybe if you had a couple of people leave that maybe had some seniority, and the salaries that I plugged in for the new people were a little bit lower, but nothing I would be concerned about. Health, you'll see a little increase in function 36, which is athletics, and I want to clarify that just so you understand. In previous years, the athletic department has 4 athletic workers who take care of the grounds, the athletic fields. Those 4 individuals were coded to the maintenance budget, okay? My opinion is always I want to try and get the people coded to whoever supervises them, okay? So I moved those 4 salaries from maintenance into athletics since they are supervised by the athletic director. So that's why you see the majority of the increase there in athletics. General administration, function 41, and so those budgets in 41 are superintendent's office, school board, HR, financial services, and so the primary changes in that function were due to when I reviewed the cost associated with the legal fees for 1920, the budget was significantly inadequate. And so I increased the budget for legal fees just a little bit. And then obviously we have to plan for 2 elections in this budget year for school board. So that increased the budget as well. Another area that changed was the software system that we use for human resources had previously been coded to function 11, instruction. And so since it's an HR function, I moved it from 11 back to 41. So those were the primary changes in that function. You can see in maintenance and operations, there was $460,000 increase basically. $175,000 of that was an increase in the contract for custodial services. Okay. Another about $60,000 to $70,000 was attributed to getting the right budget amount for the landscape services for the company who mows the grounds around all of the campuses. Other than that, it was increases in utility costs. Some of the utility budget line items were not adequately budgeted for in last year's budget, and then some just minor increases in some contracted maintenance and repair items that they needed. Security and monitoring, you can see there. The next one I really want to talk about is data processing, and you can see that's a significant increase of 32%. Once again, the majority of that has to do with a coding preference on my part. There were a lot of expenditures for software and data equipment and things that were previously coded in function 11 that I felt were more appropriate to be coded in function 53 because it's more of a technology expenditure, not an instructional expenditure, okay? So there were a lot of those expenditures that got moved into function 53. 61 for community services, that's the natatorium. Okay, and so you've seen in your monthly reports that budget is already negative for 1920, and so this is a more accurate number. That was not due to anything that Mr. Hurd or the athletic department did, but there were some summer camp activities that were coded to that budget code back in July and August, and so I don't think those were properly planned for, and so that's why you see that 63% increase in that. 95, the JJAEP program, once again in your monthly reports you see that budget's over expended, and we'll be doing a budget amendment for that, so I think this number is a more accurate number of what we should expect for 2021. Okay? And so that's a quick rundown of the expenditures on a functional level. Now, the next one is based on an object level. And so this breaks it down into salaries, professional and contracted services, supplies, other operating expenses, and capital purchases. And so I know during the last workshop, I got asked, how do we know there's not a salary increase in this budget? Well, this tells you right here, if you look at 6100s, in 1920 was 63.2 million, and budgeted for 2021 is 62.9 million. So that right there clearly shows that there is no pay increase in the 2021 budget at this time. Yes, there is a, we did add a couple of FTEs, but some of the substitute budgets got reduced, and so there's always, some people go off of insurance, and so there's always a little bit, but this is just to point out that there is no general pay increase associated with that. You'll see an increase in professional and contracted services, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, and you'll also see an increase in supplies and materials. And I know that obviously those are things where we think we can trim the budget some to help the deficit. And normally I would agree with you, but here in just a second I'm going to talk about why those increases are there and why those increases can't go away. Okay. In the 6400, you see other operating expenses. Pretty much the same, just a little bit of an increase, and then a drastic decrease in the capital purchases line item. That was primarily due to, once again, a coding change. The district had previously budgeted all copy machine rentals in 6600. It's more appropriate in the 6200 column, and so those expenditures were moved from 66 to 62. Plus, I also believe that $179,000 reflects a bus that may have been purchased during the 1920 school year. And so obviously, that bus purchase is not included at this point. Okay. So, one more. Oh, no. Yeah, this is right. Expenditures by program. So this is going to be our last kind of dive at expenditures. And so once again, we have 11 as basic educational services. The next one down is 21, gifted and talented. And so I don't want people who may be in the audience to think that we don't care about gifted and talented and we cut the gifted and talented program. That's not the case. The state did away with the program intent code to track gifted and talented expenditures, okay, in the last legislative session. It should not have been budgeted for in 1920, but it was, okay? And so we still have a gifted and talented program, but they're just not tracked by program intent 21. The next one is program 22, career and technology. And so you see for 2019-20, the district budgeted a little over $2.3 million. And in 2020-2021, that number is $3.4 million, okay? Significant increase. Why is that? So when we earn money based on our student enrollment and our students who are in career and technology education classes, we are required to spend a certain percentage of that money for CTE services. Last year, the district earned $5.6 million in CTE monies from the state. We're required to spend 55% of that money, okay? That roughly equates to $3.3 million. So what I'm trying to say is that 1920 budget for CTE was $1 million short of where it should have been, okay? I can't explain that for you. I wasn't sitting in this chair during that time, but I know it's wrong, okay? And so my job is to make sure that it's correct moving forward. And so I can assure you that that $3.4 million meets our state required spending limits for CTE, okay? The next one is special education. You see a little bit of an increase there, primarily due to making sure that we had people coded appropriately in 199. We had some counselors, special education counselors that were coded in federal money, and so it was prohibiting us from getting reimbursements through the SHARS program, and so we moved those to 199 since we can bill for those contact hours. The next one is 24, which is state comp ed. This is the same situation, unfortunately, as occurred for CTE. You will see this in 1920, it was $1.1 million budgeted, and for 2020, 2021, it's 1.7, okay? My fear is that, once again, the appropriate amount was not adequately budgeted for state comp ed in 1920, okay? Yes, sir.
When we have the increased proposed budget for, say, either program 22 or program 24, are we saying that really we should be spending in some way, for example, on 22, we should be spending another $1.1 million on that program?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. And so that number, that additional $1.1 million is why your 6,200 and your 6,300 numbers from the last screen increased, okay? Because of the dramatic increase in career and technology education budget, those expenditures are going to take place primarily in 62 and 6,300 to support those CTE programs. And so when you look at, and I think Mr. Hammonds asked me during the last budget workshop, why, if we don't have a pay increase, why is the 2021 budget $1.2 million more than the 1920 budget? That's your answer. Okay? So your 2019-20 budget should have been actually higher than what was adopted, based on my information.
So the question I have is, does it mean, is it true to say that we weren't doing it, or that it was, or that we're coding it incorrectly? So, like, for example, for the career and technology program area, we have teachers that are in the overall educational services bucket, that are doing career and technology, but they're just in that bucket and not in the.
From what I have found in my investigation during this, it appears that the majority of everything was coded properly. There just wasn't enough allocated.
So Chris, you used the word fear, so your fear was not budgeted.
I'm pretty sure it wasn't.
So, what would you say that? Are there penalties for not doing a mandatory allocation, or do you get retroactively into it?
There are state requirements for a reason, okay? The state has said, we're giving you this money based on the students who earn it. You're required to spend X number of percent on these students for that particular program, okay? I'll be honest with you, I've never had the situation where we were in a budget that wasn't up to state spending levels, okay?
Does the state prescribe a remedy for?
They could claw some of that money back. Primarily, normally what the remedy is would be additional expenditures in the following year to make sure that those monies were spent appropriately. I think really probably what's going to happen is you may see a finding in your upcoming audit by your auditor that says you failed to budget or spend appropriately in these particular areas. I don't know. I've never worked with the auditor that is hired for this district. I know in my previous district, if we had this situation, I would have gotten written up in the audit. Okay, so I'm anticipating that to be the case. And when that does happen, I will remind you I wasn't sitting in that chair when those decisions were made. But we'll do everything in our power to make sure that we rectify it going forward. And I don't want my comments to be viewed as demeaning the previous person, whether it be the superintendent or the CFO. I just honestly, it could have been an honest mistake and maybe something just got missed. I don't know. I just wasn't here when all of that happened, okay? So I don't want anybody to think that there's some plot afoot that somebody's trying to hide money or that's not the case. It's just one of those things that from time to time, unfortunately, it happens. But as we move forward, I want to make sure it's right and I want to make sure it's accurate. And I can assure you that the numbers that I'm putting forward to you tonight are right and they're accurate. Okay?
So the question that I have, just to follow up, does it mean that we need to spend more
Yes.
on that area?
Yes.
Or does it mean that we just need to reallocate from other areas to spend that?
It's hard to reallocate because those expenditures have to be for that particular program, okay? And if the teachers are coded properly, we can go back and dig, and I'll be honest, I just haven't had time to go through the piles of documentation to try and figure out, are there things we can recode? Once I get this budget to a point where I feel comfortable, that's certainly what we're going to do before the auditors get in here. And anything that can be recoded, we will recode to try and lessen any damage that might come from it. We will not do anything that is illegal or inappropriate. I can assure you of that. But if there is an allowable expense that could be recoded, we will to try and help that offset that issue. But right now, I can't tell you. I think it was just an oversight, and you should have spent $1 million more than what you did.
Right.
Now there.
We should have spent $1 million more in salaries?
Not necessarily salaries, but it could have been supplies, it could have been professional services, it could have been other things that not necessarily required in salaries.
55%, is that on personnel? You said something about.
Yes, ma'am. So the allotment that we get from the state for CTE, based on the number of kids that we have in CTE classes at both of the high schools and junior highs, that generated $5.6 million for CTE monies. Out of that $5.6 million, the state says you're required to spend 55% of that on CTE expenditures. They give us the flexibility to take that other 45% and use as we need to in other areas, and that's perfectly legal. But you are required to spend 55%. And 55% of 5.6 million was roughly 3.3 million. Okay? And so I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that, Mr. Hammonds, is the reason why the 2021 budget is $1.2 million more than what was budgeted in 1920, and the fact that there's no pay increases in here.
Actually, Chris, I want to thank you for your candor and your directness, so you're not the bearer of bad news.
Well, I
If you
am.
help us get out of here
Yeah.
in the future.
I am, and I feel bad about it because what could you do with $1.2 million? And when we get to our next series of slides and we talk about teacher salaries, you could spend $1.2 million real quick to keep some of these teachers from going to Conroe or the other districts that they may be going to. And so I do feel bad about it. But unfortunately, there's nothing I can do to help the situation other than work as diligently as I can to try and find expenditures that meet the threshold and recode them if possible. Okay.
And perhaps reallocation of programs. You know, to me, you know, it's one of the things we're going to have to think about is maybe not necessarily spending another 1.1 million, but we may have to think about different programs that we have to reallocate funds from.
And so that brings me to a comment, and I just want to say, I know we had some comments about dual language and everything else in here tonight, and this budget is basically a carry forward of 1920. So as you see it tonight, I don't have the authority or the power to cut programs, and so there are no programs being cut for the 2020-21 budget, okay? Those are all decisions that we as a group will have to discuss and make some hard decisions on as we move forward. Due to the lateness of my arrival and trying to get this budget, I'm not sure we have time to have those conversations for the 2021 budget. So we may have to adopt a deficit budget as we move forward for next year. And then as soon as we get to July 1, we can start figuring out ways to correct that problem so we don't have that same situation in 21-22, okay? And so I think that's going to have to be our challenge as we move forward is what decisions do we make after this budget is adopted to get us back to a closer to a balanced budget? Because you will see that you have some glaring needs here in just a second, okay?
Exposes. I just don't know. I'm very disappointed, to be honest with you. And I appreciate what you're saying, but an oversight, just not knowing 55% needed to be spent. I mean, I just don't. I can't believe that. That just.
It's.
I mean, that seems like a fundamental.
Well, it's not in my nature to think that somebody would do that intentionally. So I just have to believe.
That's the difference between us approving a $4 million deficit versus a $5 million deficit.
That.
So it makes it a little bit more palatable.
I understand, but like I said, I have no reason to believe that was the case. I always err on the side of, unfortunately, a mistake was made. Maybe there was a miscalculation into the amount that they anticipated we were going to get from the state, okay? I just don't want to believe that somebody would intentionally do that, and I do not believe that. I can assure you, I've never met the previous CFO, so I've had no conversations with her. I can assure you that when I shared this information with Dr. Reese, he was surprised. Okay? And so that's why I don't think it was anything that was done intentionally by anybody, and I don't want my comments to be taken as such.
In your past experience, when a budget is, so the former CFO reads a budget, was your superintendent going through this line by line to look at that, to say, okay, this, I know
That's my responsibility. Yeah, I mean, I'm just being honest.
In other words, it seems to me that onus is on the folks.
I'm not pointing fingers. But, you know, it's my responsibility as the CFO to make sure that the information that I present to the superintendent and the Board of Trustees is accurate. I was in Channelview for 19 years, okay? So I had a long history with them and built a lot of trust with those people. And so my superintendent didn't feel like he had to examine every single line item, okay? Did I make mistakes in budgets? Absolutely. Is there a mistake in this budget? Probably. I mean, it's almost $80 million, okay? There's going to be some kind of mistake. I'm more concerned about the revenue side than I am the expenditure side, okay? Just because of all of the uncertainty. And the last thing that I want to do is provide an estimate that's too conservative, where you actually had more money that you could have worked with. But I darn sure don't want to say you've got all of this money and then it comes in short. Okay, so it's a fine line, and only time judges us, and we'll know how right we are. But I think this was a general oversight, not something that was done intentionally, and I don't want to point fingers.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
At the last meeting, you mentioned that you had given back the campuses and programs about $1 million because you just didn't know how they were existing. Do you still feel that way? Are you augmenting?
I do, because like I said, I sat down face to face with every campus principal, okay? And we had conversations about what goes on their campus. One, it helps me understand and learn a new district that I'm a part of, and proud to be a part of. But it allows them, without them knowing, to kind of tell me some things of how their campus has been run. And to be honest with you, the theme that kept recurring was, I said, well, how are you making things work? Well, we have a lot of fundraisers. We have a lot of fundraisers. And so it told me that perhaps the budgets had gotten to a point where they were just cutting because they were dictated where they had to cut, and maybe some of that onus was being shifted back to the community and our parents through fundraisers, okay? And so, plus, another way that I kind of knew they were on a bare bones budget, like I said, I've been doing this for 19 years in Channelview. I knew what our per student allocations were in that district, and these allocations are nowhere near what we had in Channelview, okay? And they didn't have luxurious budgets in Channelview. So I honestly believe that the campuses needed a little bit of influx to provide some things that maybe they haven't had the opportunity to get in the last couple of years. And I know that that's not what you want to hear in this type of situation. I told Dr. Dixon this morning in our conversations, in my analysis of district spending, you don't have a stuff problem, you have a staff problem, okay? And what do I mean by that? So when we go back to, well, it's not on there, it's on my sheet. When we look at the personnel, the Object 6100 expenditures, most districts across the state, and Dr. Dixon can chime in, she's been in a lot of districts, more than I have, obviously. Normally, payroll expenditures are about 80% of the district budget, okay? Well, Montgomery's is about 80%, okay? So why do I say you have a staff problem? Most districts have custodians, have grounds workers that y'all don't have. So if you were to add the expenditures that you would normally have into those personnel costs, you're significantly higher than 80%. And so based on just my real quick, hurriedly trying to get this budget together, I believe you have a staff problem. And that there are ways that you can become more efficient and still provide quality service for the community and for the kids. And I think that happens because over time, you just get used to what you've had. And if something new comes at you, oh, well, these people are already here, here's a new thing, so we have to add a new position to take care of this. And I think I really realized that when, after leaving a district that I'd been in for 19 years, I can see how you might get tunnel vision and get that type of mentality. And coming into a new place and seeing a new set of data and a new way that operates, that's what I believe. I believe you can be more efficient through staffing, and it doesn't mean that people have to lose their jobs. Okay, we can handle that in a lot of different ways. But freeing up that money so you don't have a deficit every single year allows you to give your staff members the pay raises that they deserve to be competitive with your surrounding districts. And I've heard in my short time here that your staff is starting to see for the first time some of our best, most talented educators are leaving and going to neighboring districts, okay? And that should be very troubling to you because you're not in a position right now financially where you can do anything about that, okay? And so you have to make difficult decisions as we move forward to rectify this budget problem once and for all. Is it going to be painful? Absolutely. Is it necessary? Absolutely. Okay? And once you address it and make those difficult decisions, you put yourself on that path where you can start becoming competitive again with salaries. And it's not just teacher salaries. I love teachers to death. I'm married to one. Okay? I know what they go through in a classroom on a daily basis. But you have to take care of all of your employees, from the custodian, which you don't have, but the maintenance worker, the bus driver, all the way up to the superintendent. It takes everybody in this district to provide good quality education for our community, okay? And so the more that you focus on one single group, you create disparities throughout the chain, okay? And so just keep that in mind. Tonight, I'm only going to talk about teacher salaries just because that was what was asked. But your salary issues extend from the bottom all the way through the top, okay? And I'm sorry I got on my soapbox, but I feel like it's information that y'all need to hear. And I feel as an outsider, maybe I'm the most qualified person to hear it from.
Can I ask a question of Dr. Dixon? What do you think?
When he said this morning, the stuff versus the staff, I had looked at some of it. I am more worried about draining the resources from the classroom. You are not, when you take the 2.1 million that we contract out in custodial services and the other 260,000 for some other, if you put that on top of the 80, but you've taken that out of our classrooms. So is this a quick remedy? No. I think that what you just need to start looking at is staffing allocations, which everybody in the world does. Y'all have those opportunities. Looking at your enrollment. I do think there might be some revenue that maybe, I don't know what, a word that won't come back to haunt me, unfounded. We don't know what the feds are going to come up with stimulus money to help us out with COVID. The state doesn't even have their budget guidelines and what some money that we may be getting or we may not have to pay back because we don't know those things. But I am going to be totally in agreement. The best thing you guys have got going on in this district is an A. And that happened not out on the football field. It did not happen in the grounds. It did not happen in the cafeteria. It happened in the classroom. And so if that's what you put as your priority, is that, then that's where you need to put your money. And so, but I'm telling you to do something that you don't have the money. So as we explore more, we worked today and we had some dialogues. We're going to work on some of the templates a little more. We're going to sharpen the pencil. If we get any guidance from the board, if there is something that you don't want, okay, don't do any busing, or if you don't want the campus allocations to go up $1 million.
Right.
A 2% pay raise, and is this across the board or only for teachers, is $580.
Across the board.
Across the board. So if you wanted a pay raise, a 2% pay raise for everybody, it would cost you $1.2 million. So, I preach this, been in education for 51 years. It's your schools, your money, and your kids. You tell us what you want us to do. We can make these numbers work. You know, we can prioritize it, but you have to tell us what is your priority. If it's program change, if it's allocations, if it's, I hate when people do the 5% across the board. 5%, if we just cut 5% across the board of $80 million, we'd have $40 million $4 million in our lap. Well, the insurance company ain't gonna let us pay them, less money. They want their whole premium. Gasoline isn't gonna give us a 5%. So your discretionary budgets get back down to it's that 15% or staff. That's your options. That's the purpose of a budget workshop.
Right.
Is you get the facts from us, you get the data, and then you tell us what you want us to do. And then we will deliver that. And you tell us to go find more money, we'll go find more money. I don't know where, but we'll.
Yeah.
Our preliminary values, we can call the chief appraiser and say, of the protests, what does it look, they have all that, the statistics on all of that. I would be preparing it exactly like Chris does, though. I would assume every single protester wins. And so when on the preliminary value sheet, when they put taxable value, they assume that everything under protest is going to be reduced. So it's kind of the worst case scenario already.
Worst case.
Exactly. And then, y'all, there's a fact out there that we don't know. You guys have had a wonderful collection rate. We've got people who don't have money. I don't know if people are going to be paying their taxes this year. We're not going to know that till October, November, and December. Are they going to, they can do split. The other thing is they can do a split tax without any deduction or penalty or any fee on top of it. So people who have been paying their $3,000 taxes this year, are they going to ask for a split payment next year? So where's our cash flow look then? The tax offices are very amicable to work with taxpayers. They would rather get something over a period of time than nothing up front. And so I think we need to look at that type of thing also. And Chris and I talked about actually that today. How is the state? And then you've got the boogeyman out there. The legislature is going to go into session in January. And they may tell all the school districts in the state, we had 2 wonderful years and then we had an unexpected event and we cannot fund at the same level that we did the last biennium. So then our hole gets deeper. Not only did we have the deficit, so we need to narrow that deficit to as much as possible. Now, one thing that Chris is right on, and you've already demonstrated it. You had a $4 million deficit this year, and he's hoping you're not going to have one. And I call them hidey holes, and we all have them. And hopefully we have enough money embedded that, you know, in little excesses here and there at the end of this proposed deficit that we have up here. But no district is going to be able to tolerate 4 and 3 million every year. Number one, you're going to erode your fund balance. It's going to affect your first rating. And then then that affects your bonding rating and your movies and everything else. It's
a snowball.
And then, on top of it, we lose all of our good teachers. So, it's a priority. It's just a priority.
A district like ours with an $80 million budget, plus or minus, what, in a perfect world, where would you like to see the fund balance?
Me.
Do you do 3 to 4 months?
My previous district, we had basically the same. We had 9,700 students. Okay, we had built our fund balance to $34 million, so we had $15 million more in the bank than y'all have currently. The rule of thumb is 3 to 4 months, preferably 5, 6. As much as you can without, it's always a fine line, okay? Because as Dr. Dixon said, your most important asset is sitting in that classroom every day. So you don't want to be so efficient that you're pulling money out of that classroom and impacting education. But you have to be as efficient as possible to make sure they have what they need and the district is still putting money in the bank. And so you're not where you need to be on a fund balance level. So what, 4 months of 80 million is 20 million? You're close, but you need more in there. Right. And you're about to see that your teacher salaries are nowhere near competitive. And so, plus there's some other things here that aren't included in the budget that are big ticket items.
The other thing that, the reason this magic 3, everybody always says, why 3 to 3 months? What's so magical about that? It's because when traditionally the state's fiscal year is September 1. So the districts, most of the districts in the state would not get paychecks from the state, and then they don't get it 1/12. It's little increments. So if you're a district like us, we don't have money in the bank to make September and October payroll until we start getting our tax money in, and those start in October. So we definitely have to have enough money built up in the bank to make sure that we can make payroll before our tax collections come in. And then that ends in the end of January. We got to have enough money in the bank then to make payroll the rest of the year. Most districts, large districts in the state, it's called a TAN, tax anticipation note, go out every single year to the bank and borrow money for September, sometimes August, but at least September and October payroll. And it's a note against the anticipated taxes that are going to come. So you go to the bank, take out a note for $20 million to make your payroll in the 2 months, and then when you get your first big fat check from the appraisal district or the tax assessor collector on October 31st, they just take it right back. And so again, it's the money, and I mean, even though we only get $10 million from the state, that's a month of operating.
Good.
So, I mean, if we ever got behind in that, or they started paying that, I don't know. I know that y'all heard this number because little things can scare you. He fears things and I fear things. But when the state funds public schools with their income tax, not the income, the sales tax. And 57% of the sales tax comes from restaurants. So what do you think they just lost? They lost their money to give to us. So, and we're in a whole lot better shape than a lot of people because of our local one. The people that are scared right now are the little districts that their local tax collection is just the opposite. They only collect 10 or 15% of their revenue from their local. So every dime the state reduces them. If all of a sudden we succeeded from the union and we were our own school district, you know, we were Montgomery USA and we got no money from the state, we would survive because we would get 65 million. What was our local revenue?
Yeah.
About 65 million. Well, how would you feel if your budget were 80 and you succeeded from the union and you had to live on 15? It wouldn't work. But we do need to build our fund balance. That's safe, I know that. But that's not a priority when our teacher salaries are getting so dismally behind. Because as we lose the talent, and here's what happens. You think that it costs you money for those teachers, it saves you money. If kids don't have to be in remediation because they have quality teachers, if the teacher, those premier teachers will work the overtime. Those premier teachers put in the extra. You probably wouldn't even have to pay them for tutoring. There's a cost savings when you hire premier teachers to that classroom. There's less discipline problems. You know, your other programs are invigorated. I guess now I'm on my soapbox.
No, and I just want, I don't want anything or anybody to think that the sky is falling, because it's not, okay? Sun's shining, it's a beautiful day, okay? We're going to be okay, but there are some changes that need to be made, and unfortunately, that falls on the team of 8, okay? And I'm here to help guide some of those conversations, but the ultimate decisions rest in your hands, okay? Any other questions?
I just want to say thank y'all again. And one more thing, I am persuaded by what Ms. Jones said earlier. I know maybe we're not supposed to say that, Jim, but we're talking about budgets. I've heard a lot of people in our town say, I'm leaving Montgomery because I don't have this program anymore, or I don't feel like we have the same teachers we had anymore. I think if we haven't reached a critical point in our school's history, we're very close. And so I'd like, y'all seem to keep asking us for what priorities. I want to put a priority out there that academic programs should be top on our list in terms of preserving and growing and teacher salaries. Now, I know we might not be able to do that this year. Well, I didn't, okay. But I know we might not be able to do that this year, but if Dr. Dixon and Mr. Lynn, what y'all are telling us is that if we need to take one swipe at this problem this year, and maybe that is staff reallocations or whatever it is, by our next meeting, is it realistic to estimate what that plan might look like? Is that okay to ask, Jim?
Well, I
want to know if the board wants to go that direction.
I think one thing to respond, and everywhere I've been, we've had a dual language program, so I am familiar with it. I think one thing that we have to be careful of is the equity of all programs. And so we might be able to keep the dual language program. It might not look exactly like it does right now. So don't, if you guys are recording this and they come back and say, that lady said, it might just save it. Sometimes we have to make changes. You know, we do it all the time in athletics, we do it all the time. Special ed has to change their program every day of the week because every kid who walks in is different every day. And so we need your support in doing this to save the program. It might have to look a little bit we have to have this. Well, would you take it like this? And I certainly sympathize. I don't know who brought up the French. I think you did. We were exactly in that situation in another, I don't know why they started not a traditional, it wasn't Spanish or French, it was Japanese or something. And what happened, we couldn't find the teachers. So we had Japanese 1 and 2, and then left the poor kids hanging out there with 3 or 4. We did find a remedy. We paid a college teacher to come in, and at a 0 hour, it wasn't the perfect world. So I think that what I would like for y'all to bear with us as we try to get some financial stability, that there may be some program changes in I'm not talking just in the classroom, departments and do we need to renegotiate some of our contracts, things like that. Do we need to turn the lights out 20 minutes earlier, and you say, well, the lights aren't on in the morning when the kids get at school, or you didn't turn the air, the heat on early enough, they're freezing.
Don't touch the AC. We learned that.
The AC. Everybody knows AC. But everybody knows AC. But that's what I would like to ask from y'all. Now, we're already giving $1 million back in this budget thing, so that our kids aren't out there being salesmen instead of students. And so we're trying to give some of that back. And as we look at this, and I think in our next, we had hoped that we would be able to do this on the 16th, but we're not going to be able to. And Chris is going to talk to you about the final budget, because we're going to work harder on this. We're going to look at, I guess, we all are so tired of hearing the word essential services, but we're going to look at that. And teachers are essential services. And, the plumber is an essential service. So we're going to have to look at a happy median, because we didn't hire people just for the fun of it. There was a reason we hired somebody. Somebody's in a job. So we're not going to do all that kind of slash stuff, because we don't have to yet. When you get into the situation where you have to do that, it is devastating to the district and is damaging to the classroom. And so we've got to start taking the baby steps. We've got to start doing some of these uncomfortable things. We're going to maybe not have 5 people mowing the yard, only 2. Maybe we're going to ask the coaches, will y'all chalk your own fields? We're not going to pay anybody. But I think that's the best way to approach it. Make sure that every time we look at something, it doesn't touch a kid.
Dr. Mason, those seem to be really like auxiliary things. Is that your first target?
I think that that's the first and easiest thing to look at, but it can also come back and cut out buying a new lawnmower, and so we spend 3 times as much trying to keep the old one going. So I think that we have to look at those things, and I think, again, timeliness on something like this is really important. We might have to suck this up, and then attrition, it's so much easier to cut a job that a person isn't in. If there's not a person in a position, it's so much easier. The other thing we haven't had the opportunity to do is to ask the principals. If you had to do with less, what would you do with less too? And I'm going to tell you, whenever you ask somebody, what can you cut, it's always to cut something he has. Something somebody else has, But we have to look at that. I don't think there's, the only thing sacred is that classroom. So, lawn, maintenance, other departments, we have to do it. We're going to have to look at all the support areas.
So on that, I want to transition to a couple of things that aren't included. We've already talked about no employee pay increases in this budget at this point. In my conversation with the maintenance director, he had, some things that he had asked for additional money for, like parking lot striping, kiddie cushions on the playground, the fall surface, flower bed mulch, those things that have already been put off multiple years due to the budget cuts, trailer for hauling some equipment. And so I had told him to go ahead and put them in, and then let me look, and once I got all of the numbers, once I got all the numbers back, I would reevaluate and see. And so I ended up taking them out. It was $116,000. And so, if you have concerns about some of those things not being done, this is the reason why, is because they're not in the budget right now. Also, in talking to our Director of Transportation, I was very conservative and said 20 plus. I think the number's like 28, 29 buses behind on the replacement program, okay? At a minimum, he said he needs 3 for next year, but 7 to help us start getting back towards that replacement cycle. And so that's $300,000 to $700,000 that's not in this budget. In my conversations with him, you have some buses that apparently are being used that are from the 90s. Okay? That is from years and years of cuts and not allocating money into that area. And so he's at a point where he's in a pretty critical situation, to be honest with you. And so those things aren't in here. And so that's not a large amount of money, but I just wanted you to be aware of some of these things because they may become problems as we move forward next school year, okay?
Chris, the items, maintenance items like that you mentioned here, $116,000, with money left over from the bond funds, it's not, am I mistaken that if it came to it, that bond funds can be allocated towards maintenance at certain campuses? Is that incorrect?
I would defer to Bobby on that because I'm not going to speak to y'all's bond.
That's what we do. I'm just saying that, is that one of those items that it is allowed?
Well, I know part of it, possibly yes.
Definitely the buses, right?
Probably could, and maybe the kiddie cushion, but the other stuff is routine maintenance, and really the kiddie cushion is probably
Relatively maintenance.
also. So routine maintenance wouldn't be something.
You could potentially buy those buses with bond funds. You could buy the buses with bond funds.
Yeah, okay, we buy buses with bond.
Because that was part of the bond program that passed was buses. So there are alternatives. And so to keep all the positivity going, I want to transition here into our teacher salary information. I'm sorry. Sometimes as the finance guy, you just have to pass along bad information and tell people no, and that's the worst part of the job. But so here is some information. Dr. Reese had asked me to provide comparisons on our teacher hiring chart. And I want to stress that this is teacher hiring chart. This isn't actual salaries, but this is our hiring chart compared to their hiring chart. He asked me to look at New Caney, Conroe, Tomball, Magnolia, Willis, Bryan, Huntsville, College Station. And so the chart on the left is the 0-year teacher hiring chart. And so you can see out of 9 districts, Montgomery is in 5th place. New Caney being the leader at 57,000 and Montgomery being at 51,000. Our neighbors just to the east, 55.3, so we're $4,300 behind them at the 0-year. The chart on the right is 5-year teacher salary. And so you can see the same districts, but you can see from instead of 5th place, we're now in 6th place because Willis has passed us. And so Montgomery is at 52,242. Conroe is at 56,550. Okay. Next is 15-year hiring chart. And so you can see that we remain in 6th place out of 9 districts. Montgomery is at 57,643. The leader, once again, is New Caney at 64,394. Conroe's at 60,970. And then the last one is 20 years, and once again, Montgomery is still in 6th place at 60,443, and Conroe's at 66,070. Okay, and so this is just hiring chart information. This doesn't take into account any maybe differences in stipends or, something else. And so I know that in my conversations with Dr. Lopez, we've had a large number of bilingual teachers who have left, who have gone right down the road because they can make $9,000 or $10,000 more. And so this is your next crisis that faces you, is getting this corrected so that you stop the loss of talent from Montgomery ISD. And being new, I've heard that for a while you could retain some of those people because you were Montgomery ISD, and there was a special thing about this district. But at this point, maybe the gap has gotten so large, and especially in these times when the economy is tough and everybody needs every dollar that they can get, some of those most talented people are jumping ship to go for some money. And you just can't fix this problem until you get your budget problem under control. And I do want to remind you that while we're projecting a $2.8 million deficit for 2021, remember during our last workshop, I said typically schools don't spend 100% of the amount of money that's budgeted. Typically, we will spend somewhere between 97 to 98% of what's budgeted. Okay, that's just, I don't know why. It's just there's normally money left over in salaries because we have teachers who go out on maternity leave and they don't have enough days, so they end up getting docked, and just a bunch of weird. Sir?
That does not include fund balance. You're saying there's a 2 or 3% gap at
Right.
the end of the year.
Right. No, right. Yes, sir. I'm just, so out of a $80 million budget, 2 to 3%, you have that much cushion left over at the end of the year. And so when I talk about getting to a balanced budget, there's 2 different trains of thought. One, if you want to be balanced on paper, where it actually says my revenues and expenditures are 0, if you only spend 97 to 98% of your budget, you're putting money into fund balance. Okay? If you get that deficit down, but you're not to 0, and you're within that 2 to 3% margin, then you have a good chance of being at 0. Okay? And so maybe that's the path that we take in the short term, is to let's whittle on that deficit as much as we can, maybe through open positions that we can deem maybe aren't essential, to use Dr. Dixon's term at this point, and let's see how much we can whittle away from that deficit and not get to 0. But I just want to remind you of that fact that, if you get to 0 on paper, you're actually putting money in the bank. Yes, sir.
So with 2% raise across the board, 1.1, 1.2 million, now that we're finding out about the extra million going back to the classroom, right? If we did a 2% raise at $51,000, let's just call that $1,000, right? And it's $83 a month to a teacher, right? And then after taxes, they're really taking home $50 a month extra in that 2% raise. I'm not an educator, I think that's obvious, but since we're just having this discussion, would a teacher rather see $50 more in a paycheck a month, or have $1 million in the classroom where they can get things they want, they can get things they ask for, right? So I guess I need to understand as a board member, what's the most important thing? Is it $50 a month, or is it asking for something for students and getting it?
Well, and I'll be honest, I don't know that it was $1 million that I added to the to the allocations, okay? I would have to go back and research and give you a definite. I was kind of tiptoeing around some of that CTE talk last time because I wasn't prepared to have those conversations yet because I hadn't fully had an opportunity to verify that my concerns were legitimate. So I don't know the answer to that question.
As a board,
Yeah.
that's something that we are obviously going to have to decide, right? And that's, and so I just mainly asked that question as eventual conversation that we'll carry on further.
Yeah, the problem is based on the current, well, you can see you're in sixth. I'll be honest, I don't think of you competing with Bryan, Huntsville, and College Station, okay? Me personally. And if I was saying your competitive group, I would say you're dead last. And so that's not something to be proud of. But a 2% raise isn't going to fix that. You're still dead last, and I don't know what these other districts are going to do for pay raises this year. And so it's going to take significant monies to get this to be more competitive. And unfortunately, I just don't think you have time between now and the required, this budget has to be done by June 19th, okay? So I don't think that you have time between now and then to make $2.8 million worth of decisions to get this budget where you need it to be, okay? I would not advise you to do that because then you're rushing and you're maybe making decisions based on an emotion rather than a logical thought process. And so Dr. Dixon and I will work. We'll sharpen our pencil on the revenue estimates. We'll look at some of these other things. We may look at open positions and see what needs to be filled and what doesn't. And then come back to you with a number and say, can you live with it? And you might have to live with it until you get your new superintendent in here and we can get some feedback from that person, all of the administrators, the principals, and see what people are willing to do without to try and help make some of those decisions as we move forward. But these can't be conversations that we have now and we don't revisit until April and May of next year. This has to be a serious conversation that's going to be had very routinely and very often over the course of the next fiscal year.
One question that I had was, we're looking at the hiring chart as kind of a proxy for, I guess, overall teacher compensation.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just new people that we would hire. This doesn't truly represent what we're actually paying our teachers at this point.
It depends. And Dr. Lopez can speak specifically about Montgomery ISD. But in my previous experience, you're correct. Because if they've been in the district and if they've been getting raises periodically, normally those raises are more than the steps on that hiring chart. I assume that's the same here in Montgomery ISD. The problem is that the longer and longer you go with minimal pay raises, they don't have time to build up that additional equity. And so did I hear you right earlier when you said 0, 1, 2 are all at 51,000? Okay, so that kind of tells me that, yeah, this is probably more accurate than you would like for it to be, but
It's more accurate than we like to be. What you said is true, but we adjust this hiring schedule every year. Giving raises, and we've given raises for the past, 8 years, or some type of adjustment, 2%, 3%, $1,000 cost of living adjustment 1 year and then last year's money. But we've adjusted the hiring scale also. It's not hugely disproportionate to what a teacher actually makes on the scale.
right. And so what I had been finding was since teacher salaries were increasing so rapidly in the Region 4 area where I came from, that equity was being eroded because that starting teacher pay was jumping so fast that most people were actually making what that step amount was. Whereas when I had first gotten into the business, there was a lot of equity because the teacher starting salary wasn't increasing so rapidly. But now, New Caney was one of our competitors. And so, we had a higher salary than they did, but everybody was trying to compete for those teachers because in the Houston area, there's just a shortage. You have to get them. We don't have anything to really draw other than salary. And so I think this is probably more realistic than what you would like for it to be.
True. I just want to make sure that everybody, I think it's a common confusion of
Yeah,
people out
it
there
is.
as
It
well.
is two separate things. There's a hiring chart and then there's an actual salary. And so the hiring chart comes into play when we're hiring somebody off the street with a certain year of experience. That's what they come into the district making. And then as they get raises, obviously their salary is different than the hiring chart normally. Yes, it is two separate things, and that's why I have specifically said this is a hiring chart comparison, not a salary comparison. But we can, once things calm down and we get the budget adopted and everything else, Dr. Lopez and I already have plans to work on actual salary comparisons to provide you information with, not just teachers, but every position that we can get data on throughout the district.
I know that we had done, was it 3 or 4 years ago, we had TASB that came in and did a salary comparison. I know that as a board, we had kind of nixed that earlier in the year as something we wanted to do.
I can get you close to what they do without you having to pay the fee.
That sounds like a plan.
I do it every year, and so I just saved you $15,000 right there. So Dr. Lopez and I that'll be a joint effort between her office and my office, and we'll gather that information and get that to you after things calm down just a little bit, because she's in the middle of hiring, and obviously I'm in the middle of budget. So,
Chris, one of the things that you said that I really appreciate was that we need to come back and revisit this again. It should be next May when or June when we do this again. So you seem to be in the mood to recode things and do things differently your way. I would like to see the monthly statements or the monthly financial report or whatever you decide to do. Whatever plan we come up with as a team of 8 to help us know that each month we're moving toward whatever goal we decide is. It would be helpful to have a different view on them.
sure, I'd be happy to do that. The most important thing to me is making sure that you have the information that you want. I have just continued to provide information that you're used to seeing, but I'll be happy to change anything that you want. And so the next thing that I wanted to talk about was the timeline. And so according to state law, the budget must be developed by June the 19th, okay? And so we're sitting here June the 1st. That's why I said you've got a lot of things that have to be decided. I'm not sure they can all be decided by then. Once the budget is developed, we must hold at least one public meeting to discuss the proposed budget and the tax rate so that we can receive public input. And so what I need from this board is a date that you want to have that public meeting. And before we get to that, we have to publish a notice of that public meeting in the newspaper, and it has to be run for at least 10 days before the meeting, but not more than 30 days. And we also must publish a summary of the district's proposed budget on the district website. I was contacted today by representatives from the appraisal district, and they're wanting to know when that date is because they need to do some stuff on their side for the notice, and it says currently it's taken them 2 days to do what they need to do, plus the 10-day notice requirements. So we're at least a 12 to 15-day window from whenever we're going to have the meeting to make sure that we get everything accomplished and put in the paper like we need to. Well, and so, I know typically y'all like to try and adopt your budget at the regular June meeting. This year, I just don't think that's possible. And so I know you've got a lot of meetings coming up with superintendent interviews, and I hate for you to ask you to devote another time for a meeting, but sometime maybe the last week of June would probably be a more realistic time frame. If there's a date that y'all could look at, and I don't have to have a decision tonight, but I have to have one fairly quickly so I can inform the appraisal district, and so my staff and I know what we have to do and when we have to do it to make it happen. Legally, it has to be adopted by June 30th. If we don't adopt a budget, then July 1, we cannot expend any funds, okay? So this is an extremely important meeting. As you know, y'all aren't rookie board members, you know that, but I'm just covering all my bases.
And we can publish and have the hearing on the same night that you adopt.
Yes.
So we don't have to have 2 more meetings.
Right.
You have a public hearing, set a public hearing, go into your regular meeting, adopt the budget and set the tax rate. You can do that. Because we publish it on the website, I think we are being transparent. Sometimes the public doesn't feel like that because you're having a public hearing for something you're going to adopt in 10 minutes. But that will be posted for at least the duration of the 10 days. So if anybody has anything, you can usually put, if you have any questions or comment, please call the CFO. So that'll be open for the public for
So you're talking about the week of the 22nd? Because that next week we have Monday and Tuesday is really the 29th and 30th.
You could do it the 29th or the 30th if you wanted to. I don't know what y'all's superintendent schedules look like, but for sure no earlier probably than the week of the 22nd.
We have superintendent stuff the week of the 22nd, so
Okay.
it may be.
You can do it on the 30th if you want. You just always, either way we're going to be out of compliance if they don't have enough board members show up or whatever, because we've run that notice saying we're going to adopt it on this date. And so you have to make sure that you have at least 4. Otherwise, people don't get paid in July, and
We want to make sure that happens.
So, I'm sorry, so I don't have to be around. I was actually going to take vacation, and I don't think my wife would say she would like us to cancel vacation.
Yeah, understood.
So that cuts it down to 1 if we go into the week of 28th.
We'll talk.
Yeah, and that's what I say. I don't need a decision tonight, but I need one as soon as possible.
We'll give you the time.
Yes, sir. So that was the next steps. Just like I said, we're going to finalize this budget. Dr. Dixon and I are going to continue to work. We can provide you updates as they become available. She can send you email updates and keep you updated if that's acceptable to you. Once we get the date for the public meeting, then we'll advertise and we'll go on about our business.
I think one thing that would be helpful, to me at least, is if we end up adopting a deficit budget, which it kind of sounds like we're going to, or at least somewhat, I need to see some sort of path to getting back to where we need to be.
Okay.
So, it's not an endless thing like you said, and I think you're on the same page with that.
Sure.
But I just need to know what is it, when are we going to be back on track kind of thing.
Yeah. I think, you're off track. I don't think you're so far off track that you can't accomplish it next fiscal year as long as we diligently work and can keep this on the forefront, I think you can make those decisions. And so when we're sitting here at this time a year from now, I think you can feel much better about the budget shape that you're in. And who knows, maybe we'll hit the lotto or something, and there's a big pile of money that the state wants to throw at us just because, and we may not have to worry about a deficit next year.
Oh, Chris, I did ask that question last year, grant-wise. What are we doing to track down, seek out? What are we doing to get Bobby his mulch through donations, stuff like that? I mean, if you need to call somebody at the landscape team, I can help Bobby.
This mulch sponsored by.
Yeah, this mulch sponsored by. But, I mean, I think you seem to have a spirit, I'm not joking, Chris, you seem to have a spirit of new ideas and innovation, so I want to support that. What do we do to help?
And so there are, there are a couple of things out there right now, related to COVID-19 and some grants and stuff. And so obviously we're going to take advantage of those things. In my financial world, what I'm hearing is it's not necessarily extra money. It's going to be a way that the state can pass it along instead of passing what they were going to give us anyway. I don't know if any of y'all were on the board back in 2011 when we had all of the ARA, the American Recovery and the stimulus package. That's what they did. They took the federal money and supplanted it and kept the money that they were supposed to send to us anyway. They have a history of trying to do some of those things, and so that's what I think these grants are going to do. It's not, so when you hear that there's, and like the CARES grant, we qualify for 400 and something thousand for that. There's a plan that the state's not going to send us 400,000 that they were supposed to send us anyway, and we're going to be able to use that grant to make up that money. So it's not new additional money to help. It's just a shell game. Okay, but we're on top of those things, and we'll apply, and because we're not going to just turn down money that we need to apply for. But we'll keep you updated as those things come along and our progress. And there will be some quarterly reports that have to be done for those grant opportunities, and so we'll keep you informed as those things come along. In all seriousness, I just want to say, because this is I still am new here. I'm thrilled to be a part of this district. I'm sorry I'm having to deliver so much bad news to you tonight, but the sky is not falling. Montgomery ISD is doing great things, and once we get this budget problem kind of straightened out, we'll do even better things. Okay, but we will need your help in making some difficult decisions. Okay, and that was the end of my comments for tonight. Dr. Dixon?
Did anybody else from the board have any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Appreciate all the hard work. So that is the end of tonight's board meeting. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and adjourn. Thank you.